Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me. It is wonderful to be back in Edmonton. Thank you to the TIAA team, to Darren and Stavros and Kimberly and Courtney and everyone. So I appreciate being back here. Today, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and all of its wild changes and what it means for destination marketing. This presentation comes with an expiration date. The field changes so fast that if you're watching this replay after March 10th, probably ask for a new version. Why do we care about this stuff? As you heard Greg allude to in the first keynote today, this is going to have a dramatic and powerful impact on our marketing. Yes, it can increase productivity. Yes, it can increase capability, but it will also have other effects. Gartner estimates by 2028, your website, my website, may have 50% fewer visitors to it because artificial intelligence is answering people's questions for them without them ever leaving the AI tool of their choice. And over in the UK, the Tony Blair Institute for Economic Study showed that in the medium term, this has the potential to cause structural unemployment. They looked out for about the next 25 years and found that up until, say, 2048, it may have an impact of unemploying 5% of the UK workforce per year, which is concerning. So today, we want to learn as much as we can, both in this section, and there's a workshop, a hands-on, later this afternoon. You heard the title of the session, Large Language Models. What is this? You have probably seen or heard of tools like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, Anthropic's Claude, anything LLM, IBM Watson X, DeepSeek, and so on and so forth. These are now fairly common terms in the media, and people are using these tools. What are they? You will hear the term model used a lot in AI. A model is nothing more than software. Just as Microsoft Word is software written by humans for humans, a model is AI software written by AI for AI to use. This matters because the interface that we use AI with and the model are diverging. When you go to a tool like ChatGPT, there's a drop-down menu of like 6 different models you can choose from. And you can see that we have names like ChatGPT or Google Gemini. And then when you look at the model names, you're like Claude Sonnet 3.5, Cydonia 1.3, Magnum 2, DeepSeek R1 Reasoner. Clearly, marketers did not name these. And the descriptions for them are completely unhelpful as to what it is you're supposed to use them for. If I had to pick 3 tools for the average non-technical user to use today, and we're going to talk about what tomorrow looks like, but for today, you should be familiar with Google's Gemini, OpenAI's ChatGPT, and Anthropic's Claude. And if you held a pool noodle to my head and said, pick just one, trying to get away from that US culture of gun violence, I would say Anthropic's Claude is the best for non-technical marketing folks to use. So what is this stuff? It begins with this concept from 1957 from linguist John Rupert Firth, who said, "You shall know a word by the company it keeps." You shall know a word by the company it keeps. Language is patterns. Language is statistics. If I say, I'm brewing the tea, in North American English, we generally know this to mean a beverage made with hot water and dry leaves. But one word affects the other word's meanings. If I change the word and say, I'm spilling the tea, now one word changes the other word's meaning. It means gossip. Right? It means gossip. So language follows patterns. If I say tea spilling the I'm, that makes no sense at all. There's structure to language, and that is predictable by machines. How these things work is pretty straightforward. Companies that make these models take enormous amounts of text, like the entire public internet, like every document that they can find, like years and years of social networking history, put it into machines and find the statistical patterns in the data. They are supremely good at crunching these things down from the average model today is about 15 trillion parameters, which is about 10 trillion words. To give you a sense of how big that is a bookshelf of books that are all text, no pictures, that goes around the equator of the planet twice. That's how much information is condensed into these tools. When we use them, it's kind of like going to a librarian. where we ask the librarian for something, the librarian goes off into the stacks, comes back with something and says, here's what you asked for. Sometimes the library doesn't have a book. In that case, you get what's called a hallucination. But what AI models do is not return a book, they return a word. The librarian goes and gets a new word every time, and it's contingent upon the previous word. If you're familiar with the kids' book series, the Choose Your Own Adventure, probably for people with hair my color, these are books that have little choices at the end of the page. If you choose this, go to this page. If you choose this, go to this page. That's how these models work, except they do it every single word. They look at the story so far and try to predict what the next word is going to be. That's what they are. Take away all the hype, take away all the craziness. They're word prediction machines. We interface with these machines with a technique called prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is when we look at a word and say, what are the words that are around this word? If I say B2B, things like businesses, marketing, transaction. If I say the word marketing, there's a cloud of associated words in this 10 trillion word library that this model has seen. And where conceptually, where these words intersect in these word clouds is how a model knows what to say, which is why prompting, talking to these machines, is a skill because you have to know how to talk to them. Here's an example. If I say, what are some great places to see in Edmonton, Alberta? I get a pretty generic list. I mean, it's not wrong, those are great places to see, but it's so generic because I gave it so few words. Right? I gave it so few words, and it's saying, of course, West Edmonton Mall, which I will get to one of these days, Elk Island National Park, Fort Edmonton Park, good recommendations. If I double the number of words and I say, what are some great places to see in Edmonton, Alberta that are within walking distance of the JW Marriott Ice District Hotel? Walking distance is defined as a distance less than 1 kilometer. Now, I get a much more focused set of recommendations. Why? Because I gave it more words. The more relevant specific words I give it, the better it comes up with in terms of recommendations. Now, if I were to go hog wild and give it, here is all of my travel plan. Here's what I care about. No attraction should take more than an hour because I have other obligations. Shouldn't be more than 1 kilometer away. Edmonton in February can be brisk. Prefer free attractions over paid ones. Prefer unique cultural attractions, especially those of the First Nations people. I have an iPhone 15, and so on and so forth. When I give it this massive, huge set of instructions, what do I get back? I get something that's made for me. When you think about travel planning, if you know your customers and you can interact with your customers, you can plan travel that is customized for them just with the language model. I've yet to do any of this. You all are such great company. Here's the key takeaway. The more relevant, specific words you use in a prompt, the better your prompts will perform. Jargon is your friend. And the practical limit for how long a prompt can be, for most of today's models, a minimum of 90,000 words. You could put an entire business book in as a prompt and the model will be able to process it. Google's Gemini can handle 1.5 million words. This is the works of Shakespeare twice can be in a prompt. To give you a structure for how you might want to use these things to ask questions, we have a framework we call REPEL. Role, action, prime, prompt, evaluate, and learn. It's a 6-step process. And it's just writing out really good instructions. If you're a good manager, if you're good at delegating, you will be excellent at prompt engineering because you're just delegating to a machine. So as an example, role, we tell the model who it is with as much specialized wording as relevant. You're a Google and Analytics certified partner, skilled in GA4 and all this other stuff. All of that is jargon that immediately helps the model understand, oh, we're talking about, in this case, analytics. You tell the model an overview of what you want to do. We're going to perform some attribution analysis. More relevant specific words. It helps the model focus and figure out what's going on. And then the third step, we ask the model what it knows. Before we begin, what do you know about this topic? What are common mistakes made by less experienced people? What are your expert tips and tricks? When I do travel planning, I would say, what do you know about visiting Edmonton, Alberta? What are common mistakes people make when they visit Edmonton in February, like not bringing a jacket? What are expert tips and tricks? Learn how to walk on ice. This priming process elicits hundreds, sometimes thousands of words in the model's response. And the way these tools work, remember, it's a choose your own adventure with all the words that have happened in the story become part of the next choice. The model responds with a lot of information that you can fact check to make sure it's not lying, and it helps focus that expertise. After it responds, you then actually give it the prompt of what you want it to do. Here's an attribution analysis. I've got some screenshots. Here's what I want you to do. It does the thing. You have a conversation with it. Fix this, correct this. What does this mean? Why did this happen? How do I fix this? What should I do next? With anything. In this analytics case, we're focusing on getting more information out of our data. And then finally, you have the model encode its knowledge. You see, after everything we've done today, build a prompt for the next time we do this task. Think about this. If you are working on hiring and you're saying, I've got this recruiting ad and people just aren't responding to it, you would ask the model, you're a recruiting expert who focuses on the travel and tourism industry, specifically hotels. Today, we're going to rewrite this ad for a hotel chain. Maybe it's the JW or Marriott. What do you know about this process? What makes for compelling ads to Gen Z potential employees? What are common mistakes made by less experienced hotel operators when advertising job ads? What are expert tips and tricks for writing Gen Z job ads? You let the model respond. And then you say, here's our current job ad. It's not working. Rewrite it for me. Make it appeal to this audience. Evaluate it, and then you encode the process and say, give me instructions for the next time we do this, because we hire a lot of people. We want to, 100,000 on the docket. We're going to want to repeat this process. There's a free download. By the way, the slides and the materials and all the stuff will be given to TIAA, and everyone will get a copy. But if you wanted to download this, you could. Here's the key with these tools. Treat them like the world's smartest, most forgetful interns. This is an intern who has a PhD in everything. They have 255 PhDs, but they can't remember anything. And every day is day one. They're like, where's the restroom? Where's the break room? Right? That's how this intern works. You would never say to an intern, go write me a position paper. Like, no, you would never do that. That's terrible instructions for an intern. You would say, intern, here's all the data we have on the travel and tourism market. Here's our interprovincial travel data. Here's our workforce data. Now, with all this data, write a position paper in this format with these sections. Treat it like an intern, and it will do amazing things for you. When you are using these tools, one of the things to do is build a prompt library. This can be any note-taking software. I use a tool called Joplin, which is free, but there's Evernote and OneNote and Apple Notes and Microsoft's tools and Google Keep. And if you're stuck in the seventh circle of hell, there's Microsoft SharePoint. A lot of SharePoint users. But whatever you do, have a place to store your prompts, because you don't want to store them in the AI tools, and a place that you can share them with your staff, with your team, with other departments in your company, in your organization, so that everybody benefits from the tools that you're building. Because these things may seem like language, but they're actually code. They're actually code in plain language, and you want to treat it like code and share it with other people in your organization. So let's talk about use cases. The challenge with use cases is that these are language tools. What function in your organization doesn't use language? Not a one. Everyone, from the mailroom to the corner office, uses language in some aspect. So there's use case categories instead of the things that these tools are particularly good at doing. But this spans every department, every role in travel and tourism. Think about what we've heard today so far about your staff being your brand, right? How do they do that? In part by communicating with language to customers. So everything is potentially on the table for AI to help improve. And the 6 categories are generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, and question answering. Let's look at some examples in each of these. Generation, everybody knows. Write me a blog post, right? Write me an email, write me this or that. This is an example. I took the traveler profiles that Travel Alberta put together, the curious adventurer and the hotspot hunter. And I said, the Silver Skate Festival, which is now in its 35th year, I believe this is the 35th anniversary, they have content about it. I said, let's take that and say, now, from what you know, write an ad campaign, a long-form ad campaign for this based on the curious adventure. And the tool just does a good job. So you can use this as an accelerant to produce stuff. When it comes to things like policy, this is an example of a website design. The team said, hey, here's all the technology we use. We need a GDPR-compatible privacy policy. These tools are phenomenal at legal paperwork. Anything that's templated, anything that is structured, they can do really well with it. They can write code, and they can write code better than most people can. So you tell it what you want it to do, you give it the requirements, and it writes the code. An example, I wanted this plugin for my website that said, hey, you're reading something that's older than a year. I went on the plugin exchange, and there's all these tools that are $14.99 a month, and I'm like, I don't need to pay $15 a month for a banner. So I went to one of the AI tools, and I said, what do you know about writing this kind of software? It said, oh, I can do that. And so I gave it requirements, and about 40 minutes later, I had working software that I put on my website, and it's so good that we give it away. It's actually it's available to the public. Another example, I had this piece of software that I love to use that would basically allow you to open lots of tabs in your browser, and the developer abandoned it. They said, you know, I don't have time for it anymore, I'm just abandoning it. So I said, well, I could take it over with AI. And so I got permission, and I did, and it's available for free now, and I can give this away as a marketing tool. Think about this. In your organization, when you are creating travel and tourism content, what interactive experiences would you love to give a user? What calculators or planners or decision-making tools would you love to give a potential customer that you just don't see in the marketplace right now? Think about what the requirements would be and have these tools help build that for your website or for your mobile app. They can do that. So that's generation, making stuff. It's the most common use case, and believe it or not, it's the one they're worst at, and they're still pretty good at it. Second, extraction. Take data out of data. Here's an example. Here is all of the Travel Alberta and TIAA PDFs. I didn't get the ones that were released yesterday, sorry. And I put them in a free tool called Google's Notebook LM. Notebook LM is a very interesting AI tool in that it will only answer questions from the data you give it. So I gave it all of the Travel Alberta data, the Government of Alberta data about tourism, and the TIAA PDFs, and I started asking questions about who is the ideal customer for people who wanted to visit Alberta. And it came up with, here's from the data that's already been published, here's who this customer is. And so within a very short amount of time, with the data that already exists from all the organizations supporting travel and tourism here, I can build customer profiles. I can ask questions of it. What do they like? What's their household income? Where are they coming from? How much do they spend? You've got the data. How many of you have seen a report come out from TIAA or Travel Alberta or Explore Edmonton and go, I'd love to read that, but I don't have time? Put it in this tool and just ask the questions that you care about, and it will pull the answers from those documents. This is another example. I took the last 25 reviews from the JW Marriott off of TripAdvisor, and I said, extract the verbatim quotes that are very positive about the property that I could use in advertising and marketing content. It said, the location in the Ice District put us close to great restaurants and entertainment, wonderful place to stay, beautiful rooms, responsive and friendly staff. I think they mean said Pedway, between the hotel and Rogers Centre made this a perfect location. How many reviews are you getting on sites like Yelp and TripAdvisor and Google Reviews? How many of you are using that data in your marketing verbatim? With these tools, you give these tools the data and say, let's craft campaigns using the exact words of our customers. Nothing is more powerful for the voice of a customer than the actual things that they said. They can extract information from visual data in real time. I took my iPad, held it up to the window, turned on Google's Gemini real time and said, I'm a tourist in Edmonton, Alberta. This is the view outside my window. What am I looking at? What do you see? What's of interest? It says, well, that's the Rogers place there. There's also a casino just down below. Imagine the ability for someone to walk around with a connected device that has AI enabled and have it do narration. Imagine for those of you who have more visual experiences, travel experiences, how that would work for someone who's visually impaired, where the model could say, what you're hearing right now is this, the other sensory experiences you're having is this. You don't have time to do that. But these tools can do that for your travelers and make for inclusive experiences, accessible experiences, and very different experiences in real time. Third category, summarization. This is probably one of the best, simplest use cases. If you've ever been on a call and you've forgotten what you said, these tools will give you a transcript and say, here's what you said. Right? So, and it's not just your audio or video, it's anything. So if there's a 45-minute conversation, maybe with the premier or the prime minister, you're like, I don't have time to listen to 45 minutes of this. Put it in the tool, get the transcript out, get the highlights very quickly. When you are trying to scale, we heard about onboarding and how difficult it is to get people skilled up at your company. You take your phone out, record a voice memo, and turn it into standard operating procedures and planning documents that you can then give to new employees. You can have current employees just open their voice memos app and narrate what they're doing as they're doing their job, and then turn that into standard operating procedures. So you can make your operations more productive, the customer experience more consistent, and you're not requiring that employee to take hours out of their day to document things when they can just have their phone on and just be talking as they do it. Now I'm going to do this part. I got to sort this inventory, and I put it in these rows. For the generation of employees who's grown up on YouTube and Twitch, they do this anyway. They do it out loud anyway. So may as well record it and turning it into documents. We did this recently with one of our courses. We said, okay, here's the process, and a model turned it into a standard operating procedure. This has a long history in hospitality. Bill Marriott used to have a blog called Marriott on the Move, and it was published fairly frequently. He didn't write a word of this. What he would do is, as he was on the road, he would leave voicemails for his staff, and they would transcribe it and turn it into their blog. Today, obviously, you can just have machines do that part, but the concept is not new. You can summarize data and convert it from form to form. Here's another example. I took all of the YouTube videos that are out there about what I should see in Edmonton, and it condensed it down to what are the places that are most mentioned: the West Edmonton Mall, the Alberta Legislature, the Muddart Conservatory, the Royal Alberta Museum. I did not have time to watch 120 hours of YouTube content. Instead, I gave it to a model and said, digest this down into a list so that I know what the options even are. If you were trying to figure out what are people saying about your destination, your city, Red Deer, Calgary, you can do this. The content is out there. Just condense it down and figure out what people are saying from real customers online. Because also, this is what travelers are looking at long before they hit any of your websites. They are on YouTube. They are listening to podcasts. They are on Reddit, trying to figure out where they should go. It is to your benefit to know what is being said about you online. As you saw briefly, these ideas of these ideal customer profiles are incredibly powerful. All of your customer data that you have can be boiled down into a profile that has a number of uses. So here, this is the Curious Adventurer. Out of all the data from Travel Alberta and TIAA and other market research, I had a model distill this down into like a 5-page document of who is this traveler, what do they care about, what are the psychographics, how do they buy. This then I can use to do things like rewrite an ad or create content or tune a content strategy or a marketing strategy. Number 2 is the hotspot hunter. Who are these people? What do they like? What are the things that they're interested in? When you have ideal customer profiles for your business, it's incredibly powerful because it lets you get inputs from these tools now that are no longer generic, but are your customers. When people come to visit your destination, your service, who are in your database do you already know that you can create profiles for and have these tools then build and tune your marketing. 4th use case is rewriting, convert text from one form of text to another. I got this NDA from this guy, and I'm like, were you drunk when you sent it out? What, did you just copy and paste it off of Reddit? Turns out both things were true. I had the model rewrite it and said, make this a standard NDA. It did. I handed it to my lawyer because you never, ever, ever use AI output that is in finance, law, or health without a human expert vetting it. You never, ever, ever do that. My lawyer said, the revised version is much better. You can sign that version. So you can rewrite any document. You can redline any document these days. How long does it take you to go through a contract? These tools can help get you through them very quickly. Here's one, a fun one. Bob, you sent over 2 months of invoices in one day. Of course, it's not done. It's not going to be done anytime soon because this stuff takes time. If you needed it soon, you should have let it sit on your effing desk for 2 weeks. You can F right off, and you'll get it when you get it. Go F yourself, Karen, in accounting. Rewrite the following memo in a professional tone. They can obviously rewrite. They're also good therapy tools because you can say what you want to say to the AI and it will come out with something that it will not get you fired. On a more practical note, here is WestJet's page about Edmonton on the destination's website, the page of the WestJet website. It's a good, solid page. Here's what Edmonton is all about. But what if you were to take that hotspot hunter, that ideal customer profile, and say, how well does this page meet that persona? Because there's nothing wrong with the page as is, except that it's not tuned for that persona. So we put it through a model and said, score it based on what that ideal customer profile really wants. And what it came up with is it said, hey, here's the things that this page doesn't serve this particular audience as well as it could. And it gives you a long list. And then you say, rewrite it. Make that WestJet page tuned up for the hotspot hunter. And now you have a page that WestJet could put up today as maybe a version or a branch or an A/B test to say, this is the kind of person we want to attract to Edmonton. We want to book a flight to Edmonton. These are the things that that persona would care about. It's different. It's still factually the same information, but it's repositioned for the mind and the mindset of that audience. And then I said, well, interprovincial travel matters a lot, right? So could you take this and then convert it into French Canadian? I do not speak French, so I apologize in advance if this is wrong. Does anyone speak French well enough to say this is right or wrong? Is it okay? But in the chain of thought that this model was working with, it also said, hey, a hotspot hunter persona from Montreal is going to be different than a hotspot hunter maybe from Vancouver or from Ottawa. And so it tried to tune the language so it's not just word for word, but tuned for that culture. Another priority that is in Travel Alberta's documentation is attracting travelers from places not the USA. So you could take this exact content and say, let's put up a page in Japanese, because there are flights on WestJet from Tokyo to Edmonton. I think you have to relay in Vancouver. How much could you do if you had these tools just taking the existing content and putting in the target audiences you want to go after? You want to go after Seoul or Tokyo or Beijing. You have within reach now tools that can not only do the literal translation, but find the cultural translations as well, so that you can appeal to as many audiences as you want. And bonus tip, when you have more pages and more languages, you will start attracting searches and AI engines in those languages that people are looking for that will recommend you, because there isn't this content in existence anywhere else. So it's an opportunity for you to start programming the machines. The fifth bucket is classification, organizing the data you have. Sentiment analysis in social media is a very simple one where you can say, organize and classify. What do we see here? Rate and score things and help me get this data organized. Another example, this is the Explore Edmonton page. I said, you're going to do a UI UX audit of this page and score all of the different aspects of good design. Is this a well-designed page? These tools can classify the content that you have and tell you this is good content, this is great content that fits your audience, this is content that could be improved. And this all happens within seconds of loading the appropriate information. And the last bucket is question answering. You can give these tools data or use the data that they have and ask questions of them. This is one of the most powerful tools out there called Perplexity. Perplexity now incorporates reasoning models, and that said, I represent the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta. Our goal today is to understand what the ideal Alberta tourist is. It went through and it looked at 40 different sources of information and assembled a profile for me from publicly available data about who it was, who this persona is. When your customers are thinking about where they want to go to travel for work, for fun, for leisure, for adventure, more and more they are using tools like Perplexity or ChatGPT Search or DeepSeek. And we have to be part and parcel of what's in these tools' results. I was curious to see what real people were saying. So there's two forums I wanted to look at on Reddit. The Alberta subreddit and the Canada travel subreddit. This is about 2 million words over the last 365 days. I put it in Notebook LM and I was able to ask, what are the things that why would people travel to Alberta? And it gave cited examples from 100,000 conversations about why people would want to come to Alberta. This is market research gold because it is from the mouths of real people. I asked the somewhat uncomfortable question, why might people not want to? That's the same one. And it said, there's places like Banff is frequently cited as being very expensive and crowded. The wildfires I mentioned earlier, the unpredictable weather, the driving challenges, things like that, perception of cities. This data is incredibly powerful because it's, again, from real people, hundreds of thousands of conversations, and you can load it in a tool and ask about you, ask about your business. Does anyone mention this type of destination or this type of experience? You can take data. This is an example of just looking at an NDA and saying, should I even sign this contract? It's a very powerful one. This is a fun one. How many people love issuing RFPs? Isn't that fun? Yeah. How many people like reviewing them? Yeah, that's a delight. I found this Explore Edmonton brand strategy RFP, and I intentionally made a crappy response to it. And I said, evaluate and score this RFP because Explore Edmonton put their rubric, their scoring rubric for how responses were going to be judged. So I said, score it. And it said, the USA ad agency scored 64 out of 100. The proposed budget of US $500,000 is 3 times the maximum budget stated in the RFP. This is it renders the proposal non-compliant and ineligible. The fun part is, it took me 3 times as long to make the fake RFP as it did for the model to actually score it. It took like 10 minutes to make the fake RFP and like 4 to score it. So if you get a lot of responses, this is a way to immediately put it in a pecking order and start classifying it based on people's responses. And again, question answering applies to everything. I asked, evaluate this billboard based on its visual appeal as an advertiser. Again, destination marketing. It said, appetizing visuals. The image of the chef surrounded by food is eye-catching. Questionable image choice. While the food looks good, the chef's pose and expression might not be the most appealing. Could even be interpreted as slightly creepy by some viewers. How is your property? How are your ads? How is your brochures? Anything is up for you to ask these tools, what do you think? And get an impartial opinion. You don't have to worry about the tool trying to say things that it thinks you might want to hear. It's just going to say, here's what I see. And so it's good, honest feedback. So those are all the major use case categories. Now, when should you use this stuff? Well, there used to be a very complicated answer, but now the answer is use it until you find out what it doesn't do well. Back in 2023, some BCG consultants found that when regular consultants were given access to AI in an A/B test, consultants who had access finished 12% more tasks, 25% faster with 40% faster work quality. And in that test, what they found was that those people who were in the experimental half, who were bottom performers, became more skilled than the top half performers in the control group, right, in 5 hours. That's how fast productivity can be unlocked in your companies. And it's across domains. In terms of creativity, on average, machines are more creative than humans at creating good ideas. Why? Because if you look at the humans, which are in the red there, humans have a lot of ideas, but a lot of them are bad. Here's the easiest way to identify AI use cases. What makes you feel like this? I don't want to do that. For me, it's expense reports. I hate expense reports. I now have machines do them for me. What in your company makes you do this? What in your company makes your employees do this? Those are the first things to give to AI because it will make everybody happier and more productive immediately. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses. There are problems with these tools. There are risks. There are things like bias built in. See if you can spot what's wrong with this picture. These are 2-word prompts with Meta AI's image generator. There's a bunch of things wrong here. There's an age bias, there's a gender bias, there's a race bias, because these tools are trained on human-created data. And humans, particularly on the internet, there are parts of the internet that are just a sewer. And these tools have never been given, and probably will not be given anytime soon, a quality filter from what to learn from. So they've learned all sorts of things that we might not want them to know. So we have to be intentional in how we prompt them to think about things like accessibility and diversity. There are copyright issues. So right now, around the world, this is in debate as to whether or not these tools themselves constitute intellectual property violations. In some places in the world, like the EU, they do. In some places like China, Japan, and Korea, they do not. And in North America, law is still mostly unsettled. There's a bunch of court cases pending. But for now, the question hinges on, do these tools constitute a violation of intellectual property rights? The answer is maybe. We don't know yet. And there's a variety of reasons why. On their outputs, in most places on Earth, including Canada, these tools, if they purely make the information, meaning you prompt it and you don't give it any starting material, it is ineligible for copyright. And this is rooted in cases. This is a 2018 case from Naruto versus Slater, where this chimpanzee grabbed the photographer's camera, took a selfie. And the photographer tried to copyright it, and it went through the courts, and this was the courts in the USA, and they ruled the photographer didn't do the work. The chimpanzee did, therefore the intellectual property is owned by the chimpanzee. However, US law says that chimpanzees can't hold copyright, only humans can, and therefore this work is in the public domain. So this is slowly starting to change in some places, but for the most part, it's generally agreed that machine-made content should not hold copyright, and there's, again, a lot of reasons for that. When it comes to data privacy, and how these companies are using your data, here is the golden rule. If you are not paying for the tool, your data is being used to train models. Right? So if you are not paying, or more importantly, if you have employees who are using these tools and they're only using the free versions at work, they are giving your data to other companies that may be in violation of privacy and so on and so forth. So make sure if you're going to use these tools that you use paid ones that have good terms of service. There's a chart here of, there's some tools, like local models that you run on your hardware that are completely safe. And there are some tools, like the hosted version of DeepSeek that is run by a Chinese company in China, that are never safe. They can be used for public data, but never private data. And these tools are incredibly powerful, and they are amoral. They don't have any morals. They're like a chainsaw, right? They can be used for good or bad. There are people who are using them for bad. This is an example of a deepfake where a deepfake video persuaded a middle manager at a Hong Kong firm to transfer $200 million out of the company's funds, and unrecoverable. In terms of legislation, right now there is one sort of gold standard on the planet, and that is the EU's AI Act, sort of like GDPR for AI. Every country is going to legislate differently about how AI works, but the EU being first out of the gate sort of set the tone. And their big 5 things are deter illegal use of AI, detect the use of risky AI, things like mortgage calculations, where you have machines denying people service that they shouldn't be. For us in this room, document the use of AI thoroughly, disclose it anytime we're giving it to a customer or a customer's interfacing with it, and defend the rights of individuals over corporations and machines. This is what's happening right now in terms of employment. There's 2 perspectives. There's the very conservative perspective of AI will take away tasks, not jobs. There'll be no changes on labor. And then there's sort of the tech bro perspective of AI is going to take away all the jobs and it's Terminators and Skynet. The actual answer is going to be somewhere between the 2, and we can look at this through the lens of agriculture. It takes one human, a human like me, probably not me because I'm inefficient, 10 hours to harvest a bushel of corn by hand, and it sucks. I've harvested like 2 ears of corn, I'm down. That same one human driving a John Deere X9 1100 can harvest 23,000 bushels of corn in the same 10-hour period. That's how these tools are going to transform knowledge work. It's not good that they take one job away completely. It's that they allow a person to be far more capable and efficient at knowledge work. And part of our remit as people is to figure out how we go from being individual contributors to being individual contributors who are also managing machines. Because every person will have one or more machines as almost assistants or interns to do their work. In the labor market, in the Microsoft Work Trend Index from last spring, 66% of leaders surveyed, this is globally, said they would not hire someone without AI skills, and 71% said a leader would choose a less experienced professional with AI skills over that of a more experienced professional without them. So the labor market is looking very, very carefully at people who have these skills. And in terms of exposure, the kinds of positions where there is exposure to a machine doing more of that work, AI itself, of course, reading, writing, and mathematics, marketing and media, multilingualism, programming. These are all things that are going to be heavily impacted by generative AI. Now, if you look down at the bottom of the list, things like environmental stewardship, manual dexterity, empathy, active listening, sensory processing abilities, teaching and coaching, mentoring, customer service, those are positions that will be less impacted by AI. There'll be some impact, but not as much. This is where travel and tourism has the ability to shine, because a lot of those things like service orientation, customer service, global citizenship, that's what you do. Right? So you will see impacts, but not nearly as much as, say, if you are purely in the marketing department. What it looks like in the next 5 years is this. Overall, this is from the World Economic Forum from earlier this year. There'll be a 29% drop in the number of tasks solely done by humans, and an increase of about 12% in the tasks done solely by machines. So individual tasks, these machines will take on more of the tasks that we do. How this plays out in the labor market is going to be dependent on the kind of company you work for. If your company puts people over profits, your companies will find ways to upskill people, will find ways to put them more towards the uses that people are best at. If your company is focused on profits over people, they're going to lay off people as fast as they can. I spoke to an agency owner last year at an AI event who said, my goal is to get rid of 60% of my employees within the next 2 years. They said, I want to be, they're all dead weight. I'm like, I don't want to work for you ever. You're really, really aggressive. And the reason this is such a challenge is because this is happening fast. In previous generations, like the transition from an agriculture industry to a manufacturing industry to a service industry, this happened over generations. We would do things one way, our kids would do things a different way. We didn't have to retrain. However, this is all happening within a decade, so there will be structural impacts just from the speed of it, and we need to be prepared for it. The message I tell people, especially those who are early in their careers, you cannot sleep on this stuff. If you are complacent today, it means displacement tomorrow. So how do you succeed in the era of AI everything? You need 3 things. Number 1, you need the most best audience. the number of people that you can directly address. As a tourism organization, as any kind of company, you need to be out there showing up wherever you can. You absolutely have to have a YouTube channel because AI companies train on YouTube. You need to be saying yes to every podcast they'll have, even if they have 2 listeners. You need to be out there as many places as you can be. If you have a PR firm, tell them, flip the strategy on the head. Instead of going for, the Toronto Star, go for anything. We'll take, some person's, knitting newsletter in Indian cabins. That's fine as long as it's online and readable by machines. The venerable press release is relevant again. Why? Because when you put out one press release, it gets syndicated to hundreds, if not thousands, of media outlets around the world. And if you're talking about your organization and what you do and the value you offer, that is getting syndicated, and then machines that scrape all this information and gather it up learn from not just one copy about you, but hundreds of copies about you. You need to have a method of reaching your customers that is direct. That can be things like an email newsletter, a text messaging line, anything, direct mail, right? Mailing stuff to people. If you go to your postal inbox, there's nothing in there except the occasional bill and some spiders. That's a great place for you to stand out, whereas your electronic inbox probably has 6,000 unread messages. And having communities, both in person, like here today, and digital communities that are outside of the scope of AI. This is an example of Slack. This is a community we run called Analytics for Marketers. Maybe TIAA will have a community like this if you don't already. Maybe you'll have one in your community where you can talk to people directly. Talk to people directly. The second thing you have to have is the most best data. Whoever has the most best data will win. When I was putting together this talk, you have a ton of information published by the province, by Travel Alberta, by TIAA, by all the organizations represented here today. This is phenomenal information. Now you need more. When you're building your competitive advantage with AI, what's in your CRM? What's in your customer service inbox? What's in your email inbox? What is in the heads of every employee that you have? That knowledge is what's going to fuel your use of AI, and whoever has the most of it and the best quality will have a competitive advantage over companies that do not. For example, I could not get access to any of Marriott's data, so I had to synthesize some to do some testing on some things. If you have this data in your hands, right? If you have the ability to do customer analysis, you know better than anybody else what your customers want, so you can use it to tune and train your marketing. And the third thing you're going to need, whoever has the most best ideas will win. These tools are skill levelers. They bring skills to the table that you can harness. You don't need the skills as strongly now. What you do need is ideas. Who's got the best ideas? For example, we were talking in preparation for my being here about all the different challenges that Alberta faces, the workforce and things. You don't have to use this for marketing. You can say, here's all this information about what's happening in Alberta. What are some strategies we could do sector by sector to address this? What could I do to address this? Look at all the competing initiatives that Alberta is considering and score them by how quickly we can do them and how much positive revenue impact they'll bring to the tourism industry. And so out of all these initiatives, out of the premiers and the government's papers about the different things, these are the things that will matter the most, the fastest. You can take any piece of legislation, any proposal, any idea, and expand on it. Say, how does this apply to me? How could I apply this to my business? When a new piece of legislation is approved, you can say, okay, how do I take advantage of this? Whoever has the most best ideas will win, because these tools bring the skills, you bring the ideas, because they will just sit there as a blank screen like a word processor if you don't bring your ideas. So what's coming around the corner? You're going to hear this term a lot, AI agents this year. They're nothing but self-driving apps. That's all they really are. This is an example of a self-driving app where I said, I want you to go and try to book me a room on the JW Marriott website. So this is an AI tool that is looking at the JW Marriott's website with my preferred dates and it's going to do the booking for me. Imagine what travel and tourism looks like when you have machines doing some of the part that the consumer used to do, because the consumer just says, hey, machine, I want to go and see the Silver Skate Festival, book me some travel. Your existing systems need to be ready for this. And here is the simple one-tip hack for this. If your website and your apps are compatible with the Accessibility of Canada Act, meaning for visually impaired people, if it's a first-class experience for the visually impaired, it is a first-class experience for AI. If you can do it on a screen reader with minimal fuss, then AI will be able to do it too. So if you want to prepare today for getting ready for this future, make sure your websites are accessible, right? Make sure they're accessible for people with visual disabilities. And bonus, in addition to being ready for AI, you will also increase the bookings of the 10% of the population that has a visual impairment. I want to take the last few minutes to step outside of travel and tourism and talk about AI, not as the technology, but as what it means for Alberta and what it could mean for Alberta as a whole. We heard today about perceptions about the Canadian economy being less productive and stuff. And this place in particular has enormous potential. I call it Alberta intelligence. Number one, that lovely weather out there needs a jacket a good amount of the year. Can be tough to pack, but for machines, that's perfect. Because one of the biggest costs in AI is energy, and one of the biggest resources it consumes is fresh water to cool data centers. If you are up in Indian cabins, you don't need liquid cooling. You just open the door and the data center is cold, right? You have this cold as a natural resource. You have abundant energy here. There are projects, Wonder Valley, which I believe the O'Leary Partnership is looking at in the Grand Prairie for building data centers, in parts of the province that are just naturally cold. But more important, there are tools now. There's a model that came out in China about a month ago now called DeepSeek. DeepSeek is a state-of-the-art model. It means that it can do incredibly smart things. It's very powerful. But what's different about what the DeepSeek company did was they gave the model away. You have all these US tech companies hoarding their data and hoarding their models, and this Chinese company said the world can use this. Which means that if you had a data center in Alberta and some spare capacity, and oh, by the way, the DeepSeek model is incredibly efficient because the Chinese government and Chinese companies are restricted on what they can buy. They had to make a model that was state-of-the-art on like 5-year-old technology. They made the state-of-the-art model that runs on 1/5 of the energy that regular AI models run on. If you had a data center in Alberta today, you could drop a stack of servers there and serve this version of the model with Canada's data controls under Canadian laws and provide it to the entire province if you wanted. Right? You could give free access to every business and every resident of Alberta, and as a result, and they would get state-of-the-art AI capabilities today. And this is really important because with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, having technological independence from the United States is a really good idea, right? If you can build this here, A, you will attract investment, right? You'll attract people who want to build stuff here. And B, you can provide this as a service, not just from the technology companies that would want to move here, but you could build as a service for all residents, for all companies, and to create a competitive advantage like no one else ever has before. AI in general is cropping up all over the world. There are state-of-the-art companies in every country. In Canada, in Toronto, there's a company called Cohere that makes phenomenally good models. Next year or the year after, I want to see a red pin in Edmonton or in Indian Cabins or in Grand Prairie, because it is within your reach. And finally, I'll part with this. We did about $40,000 worth of work on this presentation in terms of acquiring the data and processing it, as a gesture of goodwill for all the incredibly stupid shit that's happening down in the United States. The data prepared to this presentation, all the profiles and stuff like that, will be made available to TIAA and everyone in this room at no additional cost. We love our Canadian friends, and we want to see you succeed in all that you do. And in the fine print, how easy is it to become a Canadian citizen? Thank you very much.